What's going on, everybody? This is Dave from Steel City Drones Flight Academy. Today we are doing a deep dive into Mavic 3 Enterprise. This aircraft now has been out a couple months. We've had a chance to evaluate it, test it, fly it, compare it to different platforms, and now we're going to go ahead, like we always do, and give you a very comprehensive guide that you can go ahead and use to help you decide what aircraft you should buy. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone knows, because we get a lot of phone calls about this, is that a lot of people don't understand that we sell the whole DJI platform. We help with consulting, equipment sales, comprehensive on-site training anywhere in the country. That is our specialty, and that's what we do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go into all the improvements that the Mavic 3 has over Mavic 2. We're also going to compare everything about different platforms so that you can really see and contrast what this does and how it stacks up to different platforms, different prices. We really have a good format that's going to help you out with that. With that said, this video is going to be longer, so if you don't want to skip to something very specific that you're looking for, look down in the description below. You're going to see a timeline where that you can just jump to very specific parts of the video. We're going to contrast the Mavic 3 Enterprise to the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced. When we had the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced, that was one aircraft, and now we have two different models with Mavic 3. We have the E model, which is for Enterprise, and then we have the T version. That is short for the thermal version. The very first thing that we're going to talk about over Mavic 2 that stands out like an elephant in the room is that now we have reduced pricing. So we actually have the Mavic 3 priced around 15% less than Mavic 2 was. DJI was able to do that because what they did was they took out the different accessories like a loudspeaker and also adding an option for a spotlight. And so those are optional now as opposed to standard, because not everybody used them, and this helps really reduce the price point for those that have very tight budgets. So let's talk about the camera specs, because they're a little different for each model. On the E version, the wide camera is spec'd at 20 megapixels, where the T version is spec'd at 24 megapixels. On the zoom side, they look absolutely identical, up to 56 times hybrid zoom at a 12 megapixel camera resolution. Another big improvement now is, for the first time, the Mavic 3 with the E version is now really equipped to do high quality survey jobs, where we can get down very easily to 1/10 of a foot of accuracy. And they're able to do that because of the camera package that they put together. Also, we have the ability now to use like the DRTK base station and other things like terrain following. So that we're going to get more into that. But so this aircraft now, the E version can really do survey grade work. The T version cannot. Next, let's move on to the smart controller. This is the RC Pro that comes standard with the kit. The controller is basically the same thing as the Mavic 2. There's really no improvements or upgrades to that. The only real changes that we're seeing right here are now that the output connectors are in the front, and it now uses a mini HDMI connector output instead of a standard one. That really is the only difference on here. Now, this is rated at 1,000 nits, which again, it's not good enough for sunlight conditions. That's why we build our 13-inch custom displays that are 2,500 nits and our 32-inch monitors, because the DJI controllers do not offer enough brightness in the daytime. At least that's my professional opinion, and we've been researching this and for years trying to upgrade, and we wish that we had a brighter remote. DJI says that the RC Plus is going to go and be compatible with the Mavic 3 Enterprise. It's as of right now, November 2022. It's not. They're saying Q1 of 2023. So I'm hoping that materializes, and the same thing with the Matrice 300 that's going to be compatible. So that is really nice. It's a much better remote. In my opinion, it's the best remote that's out there. But again, its limitation is the brightness, just like this is. So now we have all three enterprise versions out here that we're going to go ahead and compare and contrast the differences, the features, the functionality, the pros and the cons of each. Because when I get a call, I'm getting a lot of people asking me, well, what can this really do? Can this really do what this can do? And what's the difference between this and this? So we came up with a really good spreadsheet you can see on your screen here that we're going to talk about a lot of these different features and parameters of each aircraft and really do a deep dive in between them. So to start off with, again, the first parameter is going to be cost. So the Mavic 3 Enterprise is going to be the entry level to enterprise drones. As we talked about before, it has a price decrease overall and makes things a lot more affordable. Then we have the Matrice 30. Again, now the Matrice 30 is something that is in between the Mavic 3 and the granddaddy of them all, which is the Matrice 300 here. So this is like the Corvette of drones. We'll talk about more of these, but you can see the price goes from here to here to here. And again, it's when you get more features, more functionality, more ability to do different types of things, it's going to increase with the cost. When we're talking about overall cost effectiveness, and when really someone's considering buying this level entry Mavic 3 Enterprise to the other ones, the biggest thing that you got to take into consideration besides the cost is weather resistance. Can we fly it in the rain or the snow? So I want to put this out there again. We talked about this a little bit in the past here. This aircraft cannot fly in the rain or the snow. We got people out there on the internet saying, oh, I've done it and I've not had any problems with it, but you are taking a high risk because this is not water resistive. So it has the ability for water to get into the electronics. The aircraft can just fall out of the sky at any point. It's a high flight hazard to your missions. So in my opinion, you cannot fly in the rain or the snow, even in the lightest mist of rain. So we got this in the range where it is price-wise, and then when we have to get something that's water resistive, this is going to be the lowest option available. This aircraft is going to get realistically 34 minutes of flight time. This aircraft is realistically going to get 30 minutes of flight time, and this aircraft is going to realistically get 28 to 29 minutes of flight time. That's based upon our real numbers, our real testing. Yes, DJI claims a lot higher with flight times. And a lot of people, when they call me and we talk about this, they'll actually come back and argue a little bit about me. No, you can get a lot more. Well, let me explain what I get by what I mean by real life flight time. So we, in a real world, and we teach all of our students to get on the ground by 20% remaining. There's a lot of different reasons for that. I'm not going to go into them all. The biggest thing is heat. Heat kills batteries. And the longer your aircraft is in the air and the more power is taken out of the battery because it's running, the more heat is going to be generated. You can test it yourself. If you have any of these three drones, you'll see in the submenu settings, you'll also see where it's going to give you real-time heat and how hot these batteries are running. The longer they're running, you'll see that temperature increase. And we do not exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit with any of these batteries. There's all kind of issues that develop with heat. Another big consideration you should look at is the zoom performance of the camera. So, we have a lot of different variables here, so let's go into them. So when I look at the zoom quality of a camera, I'm looking at it from two different parts. One is how far away can we have the drone and be able to read a license plate. That, in my opinion, is really kind of showing the limitation of the camera. And not only just being able to read it, I mean read it clearly without any guessing. So that's one benchmark, and the second one is going to be more for inspection work when we're looking at more clearer things at cell towers. Because a lot of people use these drones for inspection work and on cell towers and the like on power line inspections, etc. So we look at those two as a guideline. So we're going to show you each of these here and give you a clear indication of what they can do. Now, the Mavic 3 is a huge improvement over the Mavic 2 because the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced could only read a license plate from 75 feet away. It really wasn't much of a zoom camera. Now, with the Mavic 3, regardless of the E or the T versions, we can read a license plate from about 350 feet away. So that is a considerable improvement over Mavic 2. Now, when we look at the Matrice 30, we're right around 900 feet away. So we're going to get that much better zoom capability with the Mavic 3. And you may be saying, well, why is it important to really go ahead and have really good zoom distances? There's a lot of applications here why we're wanting to look at how far away we can do things like this. Police surveillance, to be able to monitor things from further distances away without anyone detecting the drone. Even to say regular event monitoring. They don't want to freak people out thinking there's a drone in the air, but they're out there to keep everything safe. That's one thing. And surveillance on another, when they don't want criminals to know that they're up in the air. That's the other advantage as well. There's IR spotlights. One is going to be coming out for this soon, and this also has this capability. So there's a lot of different things that are going to stretch that. So speaking of the Matrice 300, when we're using an H20 or an H20T camera, we can read a license plate from 1,500 feet away. So as you can see, there's a great difference between the three. 350 feet away, 900 feet away, and 1,500 feet away. Now let's move on to the inspection part of this test. When we're looking at a cell tower, we like starting out right around 200 feet, then coming in about 100 feet away, then if we need to, we'll move in closer. So this aircraft is a little less than we would like to see it. Because as you can see, when we were at 200 feet away, we really can't get any real clear, real close up type of shots where we're looking for conditions of cables or connectors or bolts, for example, and we're not going to really be able to read any kind of labels or tags or anything if we need to get that with this at 200 feet away. And even with this aircraft, that's stretching it even a bit. So that really tells you a lot. And then when we have the Matrice 300, it's no problem at all being able to do that. Now, when we move into 100 feet away, this aircraft gets better, so it's basically the distance is cut down in half. But as you can see, we're still not quite there and to where I feel for inspection capabilities where we want to be. Now, this aircraft right here, the Matrice 30, handles that at that point very, very well. And obviously, we're not going to have any problems with the Matrice 300 if we have no problems at 200 feet away. So, again, where you really want to be comfortable and have your drone about 100 feet away from a cell tower, we're not quite there. So we had to move this aircraft in closer than 100 feet to be able to get that clarity that we're looking for. Let's say how much rust is on a bolt, or is it rusted out where it needs to be replaced, things like that. That's very kind of common in inspection work. We're not quite there. Now, on the flip side of this, where I feel this is a very good inspection camera and aircraft would be for roof inspections, where we can go ahead and have that aircraft and the camera 50 feet away without any problems. We can get good clarity on tiles, and we can go ahead and see if we have any kind of hardware that's on the roof, is a vent tube cracked or anything of that nature, or we want to go ahead and use the thermal camera for any kind of moisture where it could be water leakage on a roof. That is ideal. So there's a lot of people that do roof inspections, for example. This aircraft fits that very, very, very well. Now, we talked a little bit about the remote capabilities. But another thing that I feel a lot of people overlook when they're considering what aircraft to get is, does that aircraft have the ability to use a second controller where we want to add either a second pilot or a dedicated camera operator? So with the Mavic 3 Enterprise, we cannot do that. With the Matrice 30 and the 300, we can do that. So what are some of the reasons why we'd want to do that? Well, anytime where we can have a dedicated camera operator and then have the pilot just do the piloting duties, have their eyes and ears on that and attention on that aircraft at all times, that's ideal, especially when we're trying to record video. Because on video, we really got to have a lot of attention on the monitor, and that takes away from the drone. And then the second reason is, again, having a second pilot where we can go ahead and leapfrog from one to the other, so we can actually run longer distances, further distance missions away from the first operator and still be FAA compliant, Part 107 compliant. Now, we talked a bit about the survey grade ability with the Mavic 3 Enterprise. So let's talk a little more about surveys. Let's talk a little more about mapping. And that's a huge question that I get a lot. And it often is very misunderstood as to what the capabilities are, especially when we're comparing the models. So we're going to compare each of these models and really go over this very thoroughly. So with the Mavic 3E, we can go ahead and do survey grade work. With the Mavic Enterprise T, we cannot. With the Matrice 30T, we cannot do survey grade work. With the Matrice 300 using the H20 or H20T cameras, we cannot. But if we're using the P1 camera, which is a mapping sensor, we can. And when you want to use an L1, we can as well. Again, that's survey grade accuracy down to 1/10 of a foot. But, and again, that's a big but, all of these drones can do mapping. All of these drones can do photogrammetry. All these drones can do pre-recorded flight missions that we can go ahead and set it up before we even go on site and fly them. Why that's important is because we can do, let's say, search grids for search and rescue, or we need to just do standardized 2D and 3D mapping. This can do that very, very well. All these aircraft are compatible with DJI Terra, where we can go ahead and enter that very easily and produce 2D and 3D map. And the quality of the 3D maps on any of these cameras, on any of these aircraft, are good. There's really no difference between even using this with the P1 and say this aircraft with either of these cameras. The image quality of the 3D mapping is very, very close. You're not going to see a difference on there. So that's an important distinction. We can do mapping, we can do photogrammetry, we can do that type of work on any of these aircraft. We just cannot get survey grade accuracy out of what I mentioned before. And again, the issue is having multiple cameras in a single camera gimbal package, where it's very difficult for a post-production company like Pix4D or Drone Deploy to be able to come up with a camera model that's going to be able to process that data where we can get very accurate data down to 1/10 of a foot. So now that we've talked about surveys, now would be a real good time to expand a little more on the RTK system for the Mavic 3. So the improvement of Mavic 3 over Mavic 2 is now where it allows us to be able to use a base station on site. This is the DRTK2 base station that it is compatible with now. And talk a little more about how RTK works in general, because there is a bit of confusion when a lot of customers talk and they ask about these questions. So to illustrate that, we're going to use this Matrice 30 here, and I'm going to explain why we're using that. This right here is a 2-puck RTK system. Now, the Mavic 3 Enterprise uses a 1-puck antenna system that's optional. That does not come standard. You have to purchase it extra. So if you want an RTK system, you have to definitely get that extra module. Now, how RTK works in general is that it helps with positioning. And if it's a 2-puck antenna system, it helps with electromagnetic and magnetic protection environments. So like around high tension power lines, bridges, railroads, anywhere with excessive metal where the internal compass has issues. We have loads of videos on all that subject. I don't want to get too involved into that, but there's a lot of benefits of RTK. Unfortunately, with a 1-puck antenna system, it doesn't work exactly the same way as this aircraft does. So right here, this is a puck here, this is a second puck, so it's a 2-puck antenna system. These 2 pucks will triangulate with the base station, and that triangulation allows us to eliminate the compass out of the equation, so that takes that out. However, when we have a 1-puck antenna system like the Mavic, that can't work that way. So the only thing that the RTK service can work with the Mavic 3 is for positioning. So that will obviously help in regards to heavy wind conditions and also for mapping and mapping accuracy, especially on that Z-axis where it has a tendency to go up and down a bit. So I wanted to make sure you understood that on how that works, what it can do, and its limitations. All right, let's talk a little bit about the thermal capabilities and comparisons. So we're going to make this quite easy here. Regardless if we're using the M30T, or the Mavic 3 Enterprise T, or the Matrice 300 with the H20T, we're all going to get the same high quality thermal scans out of each of these. They're all the same resolution, and they all give you a very good image to be able to use. We can go ahead and zoom in to a certain extent with any of these, and you can see what I'm showing you right now is the Mavic 3 footage, but when we start pushing it past 4 times, the data really isn't usable. Now, when we're really trying to even get further thermal quality, where you need the highest quality, let's say you have to fly higher, say between 200 and 400 feet high, then we're going to want to go to a higher grade sensor. This aircraft can use what's called the H20N. We have a full video on that if you want to take a look at that. And even CZI is coming out with some really cool things that's coming out sooner that's even going to have higher resolution. All right, we talked a little bit about payload capabilities. And again, the Matrice 300, that is the Ferrari of drones as far as what we have the ability to do with payloads and how much weight we can carry as well. We have the full range on this aircraft. However, on the 30 and on the Mavic 3 Enterprise, we don't have much latitude at all. As you're going to see on your screen, we can do less than 220 grams with the Matrice 30, and it's going to be even less with the Mavic 3. So we're limited to very light loudspeakers or spotlights or loudspeaker spotlight combos. We have this ability to add those in here, but they are limited. So currently at this time, we have 3 good payload options available for the Mavic 3 Enterprise. DJI has a loudspeaker that's available for it. Then we have CZI. CZI has the MP10. The MP10 is also a loudspeaker broadcast solution that works well. CZI also makes the GL10, which is a very lightweight spotlight for the Mavic 3 Enterprise. So again, we have 3 good solutions here. They're very lightweight so that we stay within the maximum takeoff weight specs for this aircraft. You might have seen that the Mavic 3 Enterprise is advertised to work with a 4G network dongle. Now, that dongle is supposed to help with loss of signal issues between the controller and the drone for further distances and or line of sight issues where, let's say you're in a city area where there's a lot of high buildings that might be blocking line of sight between the drone and the controller. That's supposed to help alleviate those kinds of things. However, we cannot test it at this time because it is something that is not available in the United States. And we're not sure when or if that's going to happen, but I wanted to make sure that you understood in case you had seen that and you had any kind of questions as to what that is. Now you know a little more about it, and if it is something that becomes available in the United States, we'll be glad to do a whole review video on it to give you everything you need to know about it. But I just wanted to touch a little bit of base on that subject. The last factor in the difference between these three aircraft you're going to look at is the size of the aircraft and the setup and portability of it. Obviously, the smaller the drone, the more portable it's going to be. Now, we found the setup time for both the Mavic 3 Enterprise and the Matrice 30 less than 1 minute. We can get these aircraft up very, very quickly, and where we can put them in just about any size car realistically. Whereas the Matrice 300, it takes a larger case. If we're going to use it with the HPRC case, which we highly recommend with this aircraft, we don't have to take the landing gear on and off, and that cuts down the setup time considerably. We can still get in the air right around 3 minutes of time. We can get this up in the air. So that's not a huge thing, but again, this does take a decent sized vehicle to be able to put a case that this size into it realistically. The other aspect of the size of the drone that a lot of people don't even begin to think about is that it's the opposite for the size as far as the advantage. So in this instance, when the larger the drone, the better it can be for line of sight when we need to do commercial flights like further away from 1,000 feet. That way, the larger the drone, it helps us maintain line of sight with the drone a lot better. A Mavic 3 can very easily start getting lost in the sky as little as 300 to 400 feet, whereas the Matrice 30 can definitely well be seen over 1,000 feet, and the Matrice 300 can be seen well over 1,500 feet. So in case you're interested and you have a lot of really long distance flights that you want to do, the larger the size can be an advantage. So there you have it. That's the differences between these different aircraft. That is what the Mavic 3 can do, and the improvements over the Mavic 2, and how it stacks up to the other two aircraft. And whatever that you decide to purchase, we can definitely supply whatever you need. We have a very great new website that's recently built, and we are your one-stop supplier for anything you need drone related, whether it's equipment, consulting, you want on-site comprehensive training at your location anywhere in the United States. We have everything that you need. So with that said, thank you very much for watching. And if I can just ask you one favor, please, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button. That's going to allow us to grow the channel more. We're going to be able to give you more comprehensive content more often. And if you have any questions, please put them down in the comment section below, or go ahead and reach out to us directly. We'll be glad to spend time with you and go over anything that you may have as far as questions on this gear. So thanks again. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.